Assalamualaikum everyone, we are from group 2 which consists of 10 group members, and in this video we are going to present purchase and payment cycle. So before we go to this chapter, you already know how to perform an audit on revenue cycle, right? So using the same structure, this chapter will explain on how to perform audit on purchase cycle. So when auditors want to audit the purchase cycle, they need to understand the purchase, payment, and purchase adjustment transaction process. As we consider this process, what we need to understand is what are some of the accounts and what are some of the transactions that we need to consider if we are from perspective of auditor. So what you see here in the slide are various of T account. You will notice primary accounts like account payable and inventory. So when we make purchase, we receive goods, right? So kita akan debit ke inventory dan credit to account payable. Bila item tadi tu kita dah bayar, when this item are paid, kita akan debitkan dekat account payable dan credit dekat cash. Okay, duit kita akan berkurang. Tapi ni depends. If we manufacturing inventory situation or merchandising inventory situation, we may have accounts such as factory overhead, we may have cost of goods sold, and obviously we're going to have expenses account as these goods are actually sold. So next slide, this is the purchase and payment cycle activities. So what company wants to make a purchase, what they have to do? First, they have to prepare something called purchase requisition, which is used to request authorization for goods or services. So before you can place a purchase, you have to ask for a permission. Kita kena minta permission dulu. And to ask this permission, we have a document called purchase requisition. Now this purchase requisition goes to purchase order and go to purchase department. So yang purchase department ni lah yang akan prepare kita punya purchase order, which is used for the order after it has been authorized. What happened after it is we receive the goods. Includes receiving report, which is prepared at the time the goods are received. So when we prepare receiving report, we give the department a blank report. We tell them to fill out the report and we don't tell them how much we are expecting. This way, it will force the receiving department to count the item inspecting. So once we have receiving the order, now we're gonna recognize the liability. Proper recognition requires prompt and accurate recording. So some companies, they still wait for the vendor's invoice. Okay, what is vendor's invoice? Nanti akan ada orang yang terangkan tentang dokumen-dokumen ni. Apa fungsi-fungsi dokumen-dokumen ni. So some departments, they say, well, guess what? I'm not gonna record liability until I have the vendor invoice. You don't have to wait for the vendor invoice. You can record depending on what the company does. So bila dah ada invoice, kita akan debitkan dekat, contoh kita beli barang laptop, so kita akan debitkan barang tu, laptop, dan credit account payable. Now once we have a liability, we are ready to make the disbursement. So when we make the payment, this is one of the most important steps because a cash account will have a lot of credit. So we have to make sure when we credit cash account, we have to make sure we are crediting the cash amount for the proper amount. So that's it for overview of payment and purchase cycle.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Nushaira Suhaila binti Kamal Suhaili. I am present about the document in purchase and payment cycle. There are 10 documents in purchase and payment cycle, which is purchase requisition, purchase order, receiving report, debit notes, vendor invoice, vendor statement, voucher register, check register, and creditor's ledger. I will explain for the first document and the rest will be explained by my friend. Purchase requisition is a set of tasks that control the application approval and tracking of purchase requests within an organization. This happens when the department or section need for a purchase for goods and supply. The department need to fill out the form and complete some tasks before the purchasing team can accept the request. The purchasing team consists an authorized responsibility that will prepare the purchase requisition, including to approve and accept the requested item. The purchase requisition form is an internal document with this document, the department doesn't order goods directly from vendor, but they will fill out the form to the purchasing team to process their goods and supply. This document can eliminate the indirect spend and can reducing time and effort of employee to maintain the purchasing record. It also can help to track the purchase process and prevent any fraud or misunderstanding between employee and organization itself. The second one is purchase order. It is used as an official document that buyers send to the seller to document the sale of product and services to be delivered at a certain date. The system allows you to create a purchase order template, so creating each order is faster. This happens when the purchase requisition get the approval from the purchasing team. This allows buyers to place order with supplier without immediately making payment. The seller use purchase order as a way to offer buyer credit without risk, because the buyer is legally obligated to pay for product and services when they have been delivered. The purchase order can make a better accuracy in terms of financial and inventory management, which is we can know the price and the quantity we order from supplier. It also improves budgeting, since funds must be available before purchasing order issued, and the item can delivery as fast as they can, because purchase order help in schedule the delivery. The next one is receiving report document. The objective of receiving report document to control the ownership of product transferred from supplier. It also can be used in several ways if the company has the transaction like return, payable, and accrual. It shows that the goods are safe landed at company's hand. The receiving report can be used to return any damaged goods and will ensure that the payment should be made by the company as soon as the supplier delivers the goods. It helps the supplier to prevent any misunderstanding between company and supplier, and also to prevent fraud. The fourth one is debit note document. It used by the vendor to inform the buyer of current debt, or a document created by a buyer when returning goods received on credit. The debit note can provide information regarding an upcoming invoice and serve as a reminder for funds currently due. There are few reasons to use debit note. One of the reasons is to return the damaged or defect goods handled by shipping section. The next one is any overcharge payment by the purchaser because of the miscalculation or miswritten by the purchaser. And the last one is because the invoice is incorrect. The debit note will be resulting the reducing amount of invoice. The last one from me is vendor's invoice. It used by the vendor and supplier to send an invoice to the company that has been received goods and services by the supplier purchasing on credit. This document that received by the company shows that the company has the obligation to make payment after receiving goods. They use the three ways process, which is company purchase order, company receiving report, and vendor's invoice. The systematic process can help vendor to track order and prevent paying, and to prevent the company to pay and accurate payment or pay the invoice twice. That's all for me. Thank you.
My name is Anis Amiza binti Zainal, and I will continue explain about document part, and I will explain to you about the vendor statement. What is vendor statement? Vendor statement is also known as a Section 32 or document that tell potential buyers what they need to know about a property before signing a contract to purchase. It's a vital part of the buying and selling process and disclose all information that is readily available during an inspection. Conveyancers are responsible for the vendor statement, and all buyers and sellers should engage with one if they wish to avoid the legal ramification of real estate. If a vendor statement is incorrect or incomplete, a buyer can terminate their contract of sales. In my slide, I will show you the example of vendor statement. Second is voucher. What is voucher? Let me explain to you about it. A voucher is an internal document describing and also authorizing the payment of a liability to a supplier. It is most commonly used in a manual payment system where it is part of the system of control. Voucher information may be assembled into a packet. What the basic voucher document is attached to the supplier invoice, evidence of receipt, and purchase order. This packet is useful for keeping related documents in one place and make it easier to both justify and audit payables a transaction. A voucher is created following the receipt of an invoice from a supplier. It is stamped when a check or electronic payment is made to a supplier and is then archived along with any supporting document. In my slide, I will show you the example of voucher. Third is, I will explain more about voucher register. The voucher register is a journal that records all voucher once they are approved. Sometimes, the voucher register is called the book of original entry because all the vouchers are entered into voucher register before they are entered into any other part of the accounting system. Voucher register will be used if the purchase journal has not been used. The voucher register can also be used as an audit trail for fraud, transaction, and transfer. Internal control like segregation of duties only allows certain people to access and record new transactions in the voucher register. Thus, the register can be used to identify vouchers that are authentic and properly approved and others that were simply run through the system for fraud orders and cash payment. Like always, I will show you the example of voucher register. Fourth is check register. A check register is where you record all the check and cash transactions your business has during an accounting period. Business use a check register to calculate a running balance of their checking account. Depending on your business need and preference, you may have a separate business check register for each checking account like payroll account and operating account check register. A cash disbursement journal usually has columns that help you organize and break down transaction information. A chart register is an important part of your accounting process. Your register reveals what kind of purchase your business makes and can help you make spending adjustment if needed. Unlike only bank statement, chart register gives you a real-time record to your bank account balance and how much money you have available to spend. You can use check register if cash payment journal has not been used. Like always, I will show you the example of check register in my slide. The last document is creditors ledger. There are three types of ledger, which is general ledger, debtor ledger, and creditors ledger. The creditors ledger accumulates information from the purchase journal. The purpose of the creditors ledger is to provide knowledge about which supplier the business owe money and how much. The creditor control ledger are the most important account a business can have as they represent money owed by you to your supplier. Therefore, you should be balancing of this account at least on a monthly basis. The report usually sort the invoice by supplier and dates and group together unpaid invoice and credit notes that are due in various time periods. It's subtitled that by your supplier and time period so that you can see how much you owe each supplier and total amount you have to pay by a specific date. Like always, I will show you the example of creditor ledger in my slide.
Hi, my name is Azli. Okay, first and foremost, what is internal control and why we need them? Internal control are mechanisms, rules or procedure implemented by a company to ensure their financial and accounting information, promote accountability and prevent fraud. Let's say internal control is very important because kita nak mengesahkan setiap transaction yang berlaku itu adalah benar, tepat dan tidak ada sebarang penipuan. Itu yang dimaksudkan dengan internal control. Okay, kita ke seterusnya. Basically, there are 5 objectives of internal control and the procedure of how it happened to ensure the purchase information is implemented. The first one is occurrence, completeness, accuracy, cut-off, and classification. Okay, we move to the first one, which is occurrence. We need to know that recorded purchase represent items are actually required. How we know it? The procedure is the voucher for payment of purchases should be supported by proper document like purchase order, receiving reports, and vendor invoice. Next one is the purchase transaction are properly authorized for preparing requisitions, ordering goods, receiving goods, and storing goods. There should be procedures for authorizing and approving requisitions, purchase orders including price and terms, receipt of goods, and transfer of goods to inventory. These procedures is done by an independent employee that review the authorization and match the vendor invoice with supporting documents. Supporting documents is what I have mentioned before. Hence, there is 2 procedures that need to be ensured to certify occurrence of internal control. The second objective is completeness. Completeness is where we can see all the purchase transactions are actually recorded. The specific procedure is the first one. We need to pre-number the purchase orders, receiving reports and vouchers. It is need to be done as it is very convenient for internal control to detect the info. Okay, next is the numerical sequence is periodically accounted for by an independent employee. Then, the copies of purchase orders and receiving reports should be forwarded to the accounting department to be matched with vendor invoice. Following, the second objective is accuracy. In this objective, we shall confirm that purchases are recorded at the proper amount. There should be procedures for independent internal verification of vendor invoice as to quantities received, price, terms, extension, and footings. The amount should be accurate as the transactions will be recorded in journal entries. Then, journal entries and posting should be based on approved supporting documentation. After that is cut off. It is used to determine the purchase are recorded in the proper accounting period or not. There should be procedures for invoicing and recording purchase as soon as a transaction is affected. Other than that, year-end purchase cut off should be independently reviewed as maybe there are several purchase transaction that might be happen for the next accounting period. Okay, last but not least, classification is where purchases are recorded in the proper accounts. We should review purchase journal and general ledger. By doing that, we must use chart of accounts to ensure proper classification. That's all that I can say about my topic. Sorry for the bunyi bising dekat belakang tu, bunyi ayam. Tak dapat dielakkan. So, terima kasih.
Internal control in payment. There is 4 objectives. The first one is occurrence. As you can see in the slide, it will record cash payments, represent cash actually paid, to vendors, and cash payments are properly authorized, means kita akan record exactly jumlah yang kita bayar pada supplier kita. Next is completeness. All cash payments are properly recorded. Kita akan rekod segala butiran kita daripada start kita mula berurusan dengan supplier kita sampai habislah, means dengan sempurna, dengan lengkapnya. Thirdly, accuracy and cut-off. Cash payments are recorded at the proper amount in the proper accounting period. Lastly, classification. All cash payments are recorded in proper accounts. We go to the next slide, which is specific control procedure. Under occurrence, handling cash and record keeping is a separation duties, means dua benda ni merupakan dua tugasan yang berbeza. Pre-number check and numerical sequence should be accounted routinely, means kita rekodkan benda ni secara berkala, termasuklah cek yang belum dikeluarkan. There should be a procedure for approval of payment sebelum cek tu ditandatangani oleh orang yang berkuasa ataupun orang yang diberi kuasa. Vouchers and supporting documents should be cancelled for each issue. Secondly, completeness. Check should be pre-numbered and accounted for both used and unused. Bank reconciliation should be prepared by an independent employee. There should be a system reviewed by pegawai penyelia. If there is anything different, means jika ada apa-apa yang berbeza sepanjang prosedur tersebut. Next one is accuracy and cut-off. Internal verification comparing check with payment records. It means kita perlu buktikan, kita perlu bukti yang jelas ataupun yang mendalam yang membandingkan cek dengan rekod pembayaran untuk penerima bayaran, jumlah dan tarikh. It should be tally. Lastly, classification. Account codes on voucher should be reviewed. After obtaining an understanding of internal control structure that apply the revenue and receipt cycle audit, auditor make a preliminary assessments of control risk for financial report section that relate to the cycle transaction and account balance. In here we have three tools, which is internal control questionnaire, ICQ, flowchart, and narrative of internal control structure. As you can see the example of flowchart, the auditor should understand the control over purchase and payable by preparing a written description at the flowchart. For the ICQ, auditor may complete ICQ for purchase and payable are implemented appropriately and effectively.
Okay, next is test of controls. Test of control is to obtain sufficient evidence to determine whether control over purchase and payables are function effectively. The first one is test for design effectiveness and test for operating effectiveness. Test for design effectiveness, auditor use their understanding of information system and internal control system specific to client to determine essential controls over purchase and payables. Auditor needs to understand the functions purchase cycle to determine the necessary controls and potential misstatements. So, once the auditor identify, the auditor should make a preliminary assessment of the control risk. Okay, for test for operating effectiveness, test the operating effectiveness of control over purchase and payable involve a variety of procedure. So, for example, observation, inquiry, inspection of documents, and performance. Auditor need to be careful when draw conclusion because test of control only concern about number of misstatement, not the size. For example, auditor may conclude that the control over purchase are not effective when misstatement are detected in purchase transaction. There are 6 steps in test of control for purchase transaction. The first one is select a sample of purchase order and inspect evidence that have been approved and matched with purchase requisition, vendor invoice and receiving reports and or cancel upon payment.
The second one is review the client's accounting for numerical sequence of purchase order, receiving reports and vouchers, and test check a sample. Next is select a representative sample from a file of receiving reports. Next is select a representative sample of transaction from the voucher register. And then ask about and observe the inspection and counting procedure for receiving and storing goods. And the last one is review appropriateness of segregation of duties. Test of control for cash payment transaction. So the auditor need to ask about and observe the use of pre-numbered checks and test the numerical sequence in the check register. Seek approval from the client to obtain a sample of cancelled check from the bank. Test arithmetical accuracy of check registered and compare totals to general ledger postings. And the last one is review procedure for segregation of duties.
Review of preliminary assessment of controlled risk. The purpose of test of control is to evaluate the design and operation of internal control structure, policies and procedure, which in turn enable the auditor to determine the assessed level of control risk for the cycle assertion. Assessment level of control risk should be documented and should be determined because they become a basis for the decision to plan the level of substantive procedure to be performed next. When the level of control risk is high, then the amount of substantive procedure should be performed next is high. Next, substantive test. As explained before, the audit program for substantive procedure is prepared based on the preliminary assessment of control risk. The nature, timing, or extent of substantive procedure is based on the result of test of control and the level detection of risk. This is because the level of detection of risk will influence the amount of substantive procedure undertaken by the auditor to determine the existence and the occurrence of the transaction. There are 8 methods used to obtain evidence in performing substantive procedure, which are inspection of document, physical inspection, observation, inquiry, confirmation, recalculation, reperformance, and the last one is analytical procedure. And then we have 2 types of substantive tests, which are test of detail and analytical procedure. For test of detail, we have divided into 2, which are test of detail of transaction and test of detail of balance. For transaction, we will focus on document inspection and cut-off test. We have 2 methods to inspect the document, which are vouching and tracing. For vouching, auditor vouch the recorded purchase transaction to supporting document such as purchase order, good receipt notes, and supplier's invoice to identify the occurrence of the transaction, or in other words, to identify whether the transaction are valid or not. For tracing, the auditor trace from purchase order, good receipt notes, and supplier's invoice to purchase journal and account payable to verify the completeness of the record. Then for the cut-off test, we have 2, which are purchase cut-off and payment cut-off. The purchase cut-off test is performed to ensure that the current year purchase and payable are recorded in the current year, because the changes will reflect in the cost of inventory and cost of sale, while the payment cut-off test is designed to provide evidence to ensure that the payment are recorded in appropriate period. Plus, a proper cut-off is important to ensure the correct presentation of cash and liabilities. Test of detail of balance includes the following 3 tests, and the first one is review of a monthly payable reconciliation. A supplier statement is a documentary evidence. However, since the document is obtained from client, the authenticity of document should be cautiously relied upon. Therefore, the auditor should review the reconciliation prepared by the client and investigate any unreconciled balance. The second one is confirmation of balance.
A written confirmation is sent to individual supplier to confirm the amount outstanding and payable to the supplier. The most important control in preparing the confirmation request is to get a complete and accurate list of supplier, to ascertain that the amount, address and name accurate when preparing the confirmation request. And the last one is to ensure that the confirmation is sent to the creditor or supplier. And the last test is investigating of unrecorded liability. There are three procedures used to obtain unrecorded liability. The first one is to examine subsequent period of purchase and payable transaction. The second one is to perform analytical procedure in expense to determine any unusual reduction in expense. And the last one is to examine any contractual agreement or commitment that arise the existence of liabilities.
In substantive tests, analytical procedures are planned to confirm expectations and to perform in 4 stages. The first one is to review the understanding of the entity as to whether any changes to payable balances are to be expected. 2. To determine any fluctuations in amount of purchases and payable balances between this year and previous year. 3. To determine ratio and trends for gross profit and average payment period. An unusual change in gross profit margin compared to previous year's figures signifies the possibility of misstatements in recording purchases. And the last one is to analyze expense account by reviewing the ratio between each category of purchases with the total sales and compare with the previous year's ratio to determine the level of activity for the current year to ensure the completeness of the purchases records. These are examples of audit programs, which are also called as a list of audit procedures for purchase transactions. Example number 1. An auditor can select a sample of transactions from the cash payments journal by vouching recorded purchase transactions to supporting documents to verify the occurrence of the transactions, or in other words, to identify that the transactions are valid. Number 2, an auditor can select a sample of receiving reports by tracing the entries in the voucher register and cash payments journal to verify completeness of the records. Number 3, the auditor can perform year-end purchase cut-off test to ensure that the current year purchases are recorded in the current period. Number 4, auditor can perform recalculations on supplies invoice to verify arithmetical occurrence. Number 5 is an auditor can scan the purchase journal for large or unusual items. These are examples of audit program for substantive tests of account payable. The first one is an auditor can obtain a trial balance of account payable. By doing so, they can A. Verify arithmetical accuracy of subsidiary ledger accounts and aggregate total to general ledger control. B. Segregate amounts due to others from segregate trade creditors. And C. Scan trial balance for material debit balances. Number 2 is auditor can select transactions in a sample of individual accounts payable. A. By vouching to purchase orders, receiving reports, and vendors' invoices. B. By tracing credit entries in accounts to corresponding entries in purchases, inventory, expenses, or other records. And C. By tracing debit entries to cash payments journal. Example number 3 is auditor can confirm the accounts payable balance with vendors or request vendor statements of unpaid invoices because confirmation provides evidence as to the existence, obligations, and valuation of the account payables. Number 4 is perform purchase cut-off test to provide evidence that payments are recorded in the appropriate period. Next, review payments subsequent to audit date and unpaid invoices for evidence of unrecorded liabilities. And the last example of audit procedures that can be used in substantive tests is review client's reconciliation of subsidiary ledger to general ledger control account because although a supplier's statement is documentary evidence. However, since the document is obtained from the client, the authenticity of the document should be cautiously relied upon. Auditor should review the reconciliation prepared by the client and investigate to any unreconciled balance. Discrepancy between the supplier's statements and the client's records are mostly due to goods and cash in transit and disputed amounts.
Assalamualaikum and hello to everyone. Today I'm going to present on how to answer past year question based on purchase and payment cycle. So today I'm gonna show you how to answer December 2018 question. So the first question is question 5A. The acquisition and payment cycle involve a process of obtaining goods and services to operate a business. The cycle begins with initiation of purchase, requisition, and ends with payment to the supplier. So you're required to identify 2 audit procedures that can be performed by the auditor to ensure that the control procedures are properly implemented by the management within the acquisition and payment cycle. So for this question, the answer is vouchers for payment of purchases should be supported by proper documents such as purchase orders, receiving reports, and vendors invoice. This is the occurrence procedures that happen. Okay, so the next one is purchase orders, receiving reports, and vouchers should be pre-numbered. Numerical sequence is periodically accounted by an independent employee. Copies of purchase orders and receiving reports should be forwarded to the accounting department to be matched with vendor invoices. This is the procedure of completeness. So this means this procedure is a procedure that occur repeatedly. Okay, and then this one is the procedure that must be completed. Next, for the next question is question B, subsection B. Determine the functions of each of the following document related to the acquisition and payment cycle. Okay, so for the first function is purchase requisition and vendor's statement. So for the answer for this is the function of purchase requisition is an authorized employee requests the purchasing department of purchase goods by an authorized employee. For the function of vendor statement is prepared by the vendor showing beginning balance, purchases payment to the vendor, and ending balance. Next is the question 5B. I'm going to read the question and explain later. Ringo Berhad is a company involved in manufacturing and the computers component located in Batu Calon Pemenang. As an auditor of the company, you are required to examine its acquisition and payment functions. Whenever the production materials are required, the production assistant will fill in 2 copies of purchase requisition form. A copy of the form will immediately be sent to the purchase department. Once received, the purchase clerk will contact the supplier from the list of suppliers in the database for orders. 4 copies of pre-numbered purchase order will be generated from the purchasing system. Only an order above 10,000 needs to be authorized by the purchase manager. After the materials have been received, the warehouse staff will compare the total on the goods received notes and the purchase order to ensure the exact amount of materials received. Then he will prepare 2 copies of receiving report as a reference for disbursement department to make payment. Upon receiving a copy of receiving report and the purchase order, the account clerk at the disbursement department will process the payment and prepare the check. Beforehand, all the supporting documents will be inspected by the accountant, and finally he will sign the check as approval for payment. At the end of the day, all the documentation will be filed accordingly. So what we need to do is to discuss 5 major weaknesses, the 5 possible effects of each weaknesses, suggest a recommendation to overcome each weaknesses. So we have to present the answer using this format. So we need to answer in this format in the final or test. So the answer for question B is, the first weaknesses is there is no proper procedure in obtaining the price quotation prior to ordering of goods. So in this weaknesses is found from these sentences. Whenever the production materials are required, the production assistant will fill in 2 copies of purchase requisition form. So there is no sign of them having a proper procedure in obtaining the price quotation prior to ordering of goods. So what could happen from this is the goods might be purchased at an expensive or poor quality of goods from the supplier. So the recommendation for these weaknesses is the price quotation should be obtained from different supplier so that the goods could be ordered from the supplier that offers the best price and quality of goods. The next weaknesses is the purchase clerk is allowed to choose the supplier without any restriction. So these weaknesses came from this line, the second line. The purchase clerk will contact the supplier from the list of suppliers in the database for order. So there is no sign that the clerk is choosing the supplier with any restriction. So this is the weaknesses, and the possible outcome is the purchase clerk might order improper materials at expensive price. So the process of ordering materials and choosing supplier should be closely supervised by a responsible person like store officer or the owner of the business. Okay, for the third weaknesses is the warehouse staff did not inspect the condition of the material received. But I got from this one. After the material have been received, the warehouse staff will compare the total on the goods received notes and the purchase order to ensure exact amount of materials received. So the warehouse staff did not inspect the quality and condition of the material. So this will result to acceptance of damaged goods because no inspection was made. So what we can do is the warehouse staff should verify the condition of the materials received by inspecting the material. Okay, so for the next weaknesses is there should be approval before the payment to the supplier. This is from this line, which is upon receiving a copy of receiving report and the purchase order, the account clerk at the disbursement department will process the payment and prepare the check. So there were no approval on this part, so this can result to errors made by the account clerk will not be detected, which may result in over or underpayment to the supplier. So what we can do to avoid is there should be an independent check or review by the superior. Next, the last weakness is no proper segregation of duties when the accountant approve the check and record the transaction in the ledger. The accountant is also the only signatory of the check. So where I got the weakness from, beforehand all the supporting document will be inspected by the accountant, and finally he will sign check as approval for payment. Okay, So what could happen is the misappropriation of the cash or issuance of fraudulent check or error in records. So there should be proper segregation of duties between person authorizing and recording the transaction. The check should be signed by at least 2 authorized signatories. I hope you understand what I thought, and thank you. Bye.